We are on day 3 of a national manhunt for the gunman who killed the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, Brian Thompson, right there on your screen. And we do have brand new video of the possible suspect after leaving a Starbucks and right before the shooting happened at Midtown Manhattan at that Hilton Hotel. Now, police zeroing in on that shooter's comings and goings. They hope that what they see through this surveillance video helps them catch him, and soon. So here's what's new at this hour. The suspect traveled to New York City on a bus from Atlanta days before the shooting. Detectives also found that he used a fake New Jersey ID when he checked into that Manhattan hostel where he stayed prior to the shooting. So let's bring in CBS News senior coordinating producer on crime and public safety, Anna Schechter, one more time. Anna, good to see you on a Friday. We know this has been a busy week in your unit. These new clues really seem to give us a signal that there could be more headlines coming in on the identity of this killer. Is that how you read it as well?
That's right. The fact that police believe they know which bus route the person of interest took into New York City, that he arrived on November 24th and checked into that hostel. So there's a lot of places that they could collect DNA evidence. They also recovered a coffee cup at the Starbucks right by where the shooter carried out the attack, and they believed that the shooter's DNA was on that coffee cup. That has been sent to a Queens forensic lab, and investigators are still waiting on the results of that, and so we are standing by to hear whether there was a match or whether any further information of value was gleaned from that. Law enforcement feels confident that they will be able to arrest this individual, but at the same time, they acknowledge that they are not certain who it is that pulled that trigger, Reed.
And let's speak about that trigger and the gun at that. How could the gun help them in this search? Because there's been a lot of talk that there was a silencer on the end of that gun. We now know the kind of a gun. How can that lead police to the bad guy?
Well, if they can find that gun, which investigators believe might be inside the backpack, they think he might have stashed it in Central Park. It has not yet been found, now 48 hours later. But as you alluded to, a gun would give a lot of clues. First of all, that would go immediately get fast-tracked to the ATF for their forensic work to find the serial number on the gun and try to trace it back to a purchase. And generally, if a gun is purchased legally, you need to present an ID. And remember, a fake New Jersey ID was used by the person of interest at that hostel. But investigators are hoping that if they can figure out where the gun was purchased, they might be able to get an ID more quickly. We are more than 48 hours out from when the shooting happened, so time is a-wasting, and investigators are getting antsy to really close in on the person who carried out the murder.
And, you know, we saw that video, at least the clip of the video from the youth hostel where he was asked to pull his mask down so she could, quote, see his smiling face. He may regret that very moment. Now, that speaks to facial recognition technology. Catch us up on how that technology can be very sharp and a huge tool in finding this guy.
It's central to this investigation. All of the CCTV footage, all the surveillance footage gathered is really how we actually even knew we placed the person of interest at 5 a.m. uptown in Upper Midtown on the Upper West Side, tracked him at that Starbucks, or even before that, coming out of the subway, then at the Starbucks, then at the scene of the crime, and then riding his bicycle up into Central Park, and then exiting the park on the Upper West Side. It's so key. The facial recognition is extremely helpful because our faces are everywhere. There are cameras all over the place using our facial imagery to match us, verifying identity for our convenience, but also for investigative to aid investigators if something like this happens. Now, what my sources tell me is that the angle, the frame grab that we see that came from surveillance footage at that hostel. It was taken from a higher angle, and it was kind of a difficult angle. They couldn't get a match on an identity from that alone. So it also shows you that there are limitations to the technology. So it is not like just immediate where we have that image, we have got the person's ID. That is not the case. And police are being very careful not to put out any names at this time.
Okay, so the bullet casings at the scene with those words, deny, delay, depose. Yeah. Why are those words on those casings such a critical component to this specific investigation and this specific murder?
Well, they are key, and investigators are homing in on them because they point to motive. And those words, deny, delay, potentially depose, could be related directly to people who are disgruntled with how the health insurance industry handles people, citizens who need health care and who need coverage for very expensive health care. Health care costs in the U.S. are through the roof. And so they believe that those words that were meticulously written with a Sharpie pen on the bullet and the casings, according to our sources, that those words are the biggest clue as to the motive of this crime.
And for those of us who are fascinated by crime technology, I have another question for you. That backpack looks like a very specific kind of backpack. And I ask this because, you know, we know he was able to handle a gun jam. So he knew something about ballistics. He knew to write something onto a bullet casing. We know he traveled. We knew he was proficient now to use a fake ID. What does that backpack say about what we could add to the profile?
Well, he used it that morning. I don't know if it adds too much, but it is distinctive. It actually helped investigators identify him in some of the footage, but also look at the neutral color of the backpack and look at the fact that it has not yet been found in Central Park. That backpack likely contains all the clues that investigators might need to make a positive ID on the suspect, and it is nowhere to be found.
Yeah, very specific, a very different kind of backpack. Almost looks like something I carry camera equipment in. So it's fascinating to see, and all of these pieces add up. Anna, it's always great to talk to you, CBS News senior coordinating producer on crime and public safety. And boy, do we have a crime and public safety story here. Have a good weekend, and thank you for that information. Let's go to Washington now, and day 4 of a guy knocking doors on Capitol Hill. And this guy is also getting knocked from every side after President-elect Donald Trump picked him to lead the Defense Department. Again, we're talking about Pete Hegseth. Now, despite a lot of allegations of sexual misconduct, financial mismanagement, and repeated intoxication, he denies it all. He says he won't back down. And also, despite reports that Donald Trump has backup choices waiting in the wings to replace Hegseth, the president-elect threw water on those claims. Look at this. This is on social media. Donald Trump says Pete's support is strong and deep. He also goes on to say Pete is a winner, and there's nothing that can be done to change that. Well, yesterday, our very own CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane caught up with Pete Hegseth on the Hill and asked him about senators pressing him specifically on the issue of alcohol abuse. Listen.
I will answer all of these senators' questions, but this will not be a process tried in the media. I don't answer to anyone in this group, none of you, not to that camera at all. I answer to President Trump, who received 76 million votes on behalf and a mandate for change. I answer to the 100 senators who are part of this process and those in the committee, and I answer to my Lord and Savior and my wife and my family. I'm proud to be here. And as long as Donald Trump wants me in this fight, I'm going to be standing right here in this fight, fighting to bring our Pentagon back to what it needs to be.
So let's go live to our nation's capital and CBS News correspondent for Congress, Scott MacFarlane. Scott, we saw you right there in that shot. We're also understanding that the Vice President-elect J.D. Vance is signaling his support. Is that having any impact on lawmakers to have the Vice President-elect there?
Yeah, Pete Hegseth had quite a week here, Reed. It's a good question. He was here 4 straight days, taking meetings with senators who will decide his fate. On this off day, with the Senate gone, there's Donald Trump. with his social media post. We know the vice president-elect has also been championing Pete Hegseth. But here's the bottom line. It's not clear to anybody if any of this is breaking through, because so far, after those 4 days, Pete Hegseth has limited himself to only visits with Trump loyalists in the U.S. Senate, those who consistently back whatever Donald Trump does. What's more, he didn't walk away from this week with any big political trophies. None of the potentially pivotal, more moderate Republican senators have said anything of support or announcing their support for Pete Hegseth. And what's more, a uniquely impactful senator in all this is Iowa's Joni Ernst. No moderate, but she's a military veteran. She has particular heft on issues involving the Pentagon. She's been rumored as a backup plan if Pete Hegseth's candidacy falters further. And she took a meeting with Hegseth and walked out without any demonstrative statement of support. He's concluded this exhaustive week up here on Capitol Hill without making any clear inroads into the votes he'll need.
I want to ask you about something else. Democratic Senator-elect Adam Schiff just resigned from his post in the House. What can you tell us about that resignation just for his post in the House?
Yeah. In a tough year for Democrats in elections, Adam Schiff did win the open U.S. Senate seat in California. He is moving up to the U.S. Senate, and to get an early start on all those other elected new senators, he's transitioning now to his Senate post. Standing down today from his post in the U.S. House, he'll now assume California's Senate seat, which is going to be available because the person who's been holding it, LaFonza Butler, was appointed as a fill-in successor for the late Dianne Feinstein. Adam Schiff moving over in December versus on January 3rd, when all the other newly elected senators come in, gives him a bit of seniority, which won't mean much next year, but would mean the world to potentially California voters and Schiff himself come 2026, 2028, and beyond.
So what about the shocking development? The Speaker Johnson says no more funding for Ukraine before Donald Trump takes office. This comes just a few weeks, Scott, after the U.S. authorized the use of those American-made missiles by Ukraine. So walk us through that decision, especially given that timing.
It holds the potential of being so impactful on the ground in the war Ukraine is fighting against Russian aggression. Mike Johnson cutting off the possibility of further funding for Ukraine before January means they're going to miss this opportunity. There is a must-pass bill going through Congress in December, enormous in size and scope, to keep the government open, to fund Washington and America for at least a few more months. That's the type of bill that would include more foreign aid. By saying no to that, he forestalls Ukraine aid at least through the beginning of the Trump administration, and Donald Trump has equivocated back and forth over how he would and if he would continue to support Ukraine. Even though that was a smaller moment in a very busy week here, Reed, what Speaker Johnson said about Ukraine could have enormous impact in the months and years to come.
All right, and you also have some news to break here on CBS News 24/7 about New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, look at the youth movement that's happening among U.S. House Democrats coming off this painful set of Democratic losses on November 5th. Several very senior House Democrats who've been top positions on committees, key committees for many years now, are getting challenged by younger members, trying to get new voices, new opinions, new leadership into committees. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 35 years old, elected first just a few years ago, now seeking to be the top Democrat on the very visible House Oversight Committee, the panel that has all those high-profile, highly charged hearings. She's not the only one. The House Judiciary Committee, Agriculture Committee, and Natural Resources Committee are also seeing a youth movement, people a generation younger than the longtime ranking members, seeking those posts now. We'll keep watching that, but this seems to be more fallout, Reed, from what happened in July when there was a youth movement at the very top of the ticket.
Absolutely. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland, thank you so much for streaming with us today. Hey, coming up, California, we know this, it's earthquake country, but the powerful quake that hit right off of the Northern California coastline was actually quite rare. Scientists weighing in on something that shook a lot of people and caused hundreds of thousands of people to seek higher ground with the ensuing tsunami warning. Stay with us. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. We are getting a window into President-elect Donald Trump's conversations with leaders from nations that he has threatened with tariffs. He's accepting an award in Long Island yesterday. That's the scene when he talked about a conversation with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. So let's bring in CBS News political reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia, first, what did he have to say about Trudeau and Sheinbaum?
Well, Reid, Trump making a joke last night saying that Trudeau came flying into Mar-a-Lago after he had made that Truth Social post where he threatened Canada and Mexico with 25% tariffs because of the immigration crisis at the southern border. So Trump last night saying he spoke with Canada, Justin came flying in, and that's just the beginning. And then he later said he spoke with the new president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, and he said that they agreed at the time to limit immigration on the southern border. Now, Sheinbaum declined to say that that happened, instead saying they agreed to build bridges rather than put up walls, a conversation there between the two of them. But Trump going on to say she had claimed, "Why are you doing this to me?" He said, "I'm not. I'm just putting a lot of tariffs on because you're allowing criminals to pour into the country." So kind of getting a glimpse before Trump is even in office about what he is planning to do with foreign leaders, which is something he has talked about, which is levy tariffs, threaten tariffs, extreme tariffs of 25% against countries who are not doing what he sees fit, in this case on the topic of immigration.
Olivia, we also have to ask about embattled Pete Hegseth and what looks like the president-elect doubling down and saying Pete Hegseth is a winner and to not believe reports that he has other people waiting in the wings. What's your reporting on that?
Yeah, well, it caps off a really interesting week of what we've seen coming out of Mar-a-Lago in response to Hegseth on Capitol Hill. You know, all week we had been hearing Pete Hegseth talk about having the support of the president-elect. We would hear him in the morning saying, "I just got off the phone with Trump," and he's expressing, "I still have his support." But now for the first time today, we heard from Trump himself on Truth Social, his social media platform, saying that Hegseth is doing very well. His support is strong and deep, and saying that Pete is a winner and there's nothing that can be done to change that. It's the first time we've really seen him throw his support behind Hegseth since announcing that he would be his pick for Secretary of Defense amid all of these allegations of financial impropriety, sexual misconduct, issues with his prior marriages as far as affairs. So interesting that we're hearing from Trump then, as he's set to make this trip abroad tonight, that he's signaling to Congress that he is still interested in Hegseth. He is still backing him. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance says he is still backing him as well, even as Hegseth appears to not have the numbers, as Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa is saying that she is not sure if she will vote for him just yet.
Yeah, and Hegseth really saying he doesn't have to answer to anybody in the media today when he talked to congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane. So I want to ask you about another name, another of Trump's picks. Venture capitalist David Sachs, AI and crypto czar. What is that position and what do we know about Sachs?
Well, it's a brand new position, and it's kind of emblematic of what we've seen this entire cycle, which is that the billionaires who have supported Trump and donated to him are getting these positions within government to do a lot of government reform. As we know, artificial intelligence is going to be one of the big upcoming battles we see coming out of Washington, the regulation around that. So Trump is entrusting David Sachs with that. He's no stranger to Elon Musk. They had worked together previously through their days in PayPal. But it's notable that he's creating this new position not only on artificial intelligence and kind of reining in big tech's use of it, but also on cryptocurrency. Trump has promised to be very friendly to the crypto community. And as a result, we've really seen Bitcoin this week spike to above $100,000.
Right.
That's a huge, monumental milestone for that cryptocurrency to make. So really interesting there to see Trump interested in pulling in people who are perhaps critical of cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence regulation coming out of Washington before, and kind of flipping the script on them, having people who are more open and more welcome to it coming in.
It's a crypto sea change. Olivia Rinaldi, thank you so much for that conversation. We appreciate you bringing us the headlines. Now, moving on the map to Northern California, and you can see the map right there. They show more than 120 aftershocks. They have hit that region since that magnitude 7 earthquake struck yesterday along the Oregon and California coastline. That quake, the largest California earthquake recorded in recent years. And you are seeing the rolling and the shaking, a lot of broken glass and a lot of rattled nerves, especially close to that epicenter. So first the quake, Then the tsunami warning to get to higher ground, that impacted at least 5 million people. And in fact, in San Francisco, there's a big transit tube under the water in the Bay Area, and for a time, that even shut down. People jammed the roadways trying to get away from the water and get up to the higher ground, heeding the warnings of these emergency patrols who very quickly went out. But in and around Humboldt County, closest to the epicenter, a lot of shaking video coming forward on your social media feeds, and now it's about the aftermath. CBS News correspondent Jason Allen reports from Eureka.
Things are still getting a little bit back to normal here in Northern California. Remember, people picked up everything, stopped what they were doing, and evacuated to higher ground when that earthquake hit yesterday. Of course, the big concern being the potential for a tsunami in that hour or so after the quake. But as people came back to maybe what they left behind yesterday and evacuated, they're finding it's maybe just pick a few things up that fell off of shelves, maybe shelves knocked over, and thankfully no major structural damage. There have been some reports possibly of some homes with some foundation issues, maybe some cracks in the wall, but no major structure damage that we can see here in the Eureka area or major damage to infrastructure. A lot of people obviously concerned with that possibility of a tsunami. In the end, there was a very small rise in the level of water, just a few inches that was recorded. Thankfully, nothing like a few feet that authorities worried might be the case with this major earthquake of a 7.0. The aftershocks continue. They happened in the overnight hours and again this morning, though very few of those have been felt, if any. Most of those occurring again in the offshore area. But seismologists are saying they could continue to see the risk of aftershocks in the coming hours, the days, maybe even the next week after an earthquake that was this strong. Back to you.
All right, Jason, thanks for that report. And check this out. It's a better look at how the shaking actually moved marijuana plants. This is video to our monitors from a licensed cannabis grow room in Humboldt County. And as you can see, marijuana got a little bit of a shake. The buds felt the bump. Now, Humboldt County is a huge playmaker in cannabis and that industry. And because of that, there are a lot of lights needed to grow these rooms. Well, you can see those lights swayed back and forth. And there's new talk today that some of those lights could fall right down on what is arguably fuel, causing a fire. Thankfully, nothing like that happened. But we can show you that was the impact of the shake there on the plants. Now, take a look at this. This list right here shows each one of these a magnitude 7 or more earthquake. It's a rare occurrence, only 9 in the year so far. And this latest was the first to happen in the United States. The last big earthquake like this happened in Russia a few months ago. So it's just sort of interesting the day after, Jess, and we were on air for hours yesterday to sort of see where we rank on earthquakes, especially those 7 and above.
You're right. Well, it was back in 2019. That was when the Ridgecrest earthquake happened, and that was a 7.1. So this is the strongest California has seen since 2019.
Wow.
Putting that into perspective, too, there's still a lot of aftershocks as well. So let's take a look at what's happening for us. Widespread throughout this map, actually, what we see behind me, and we'll take it full screen in just a second. This is the aftershock forecast. And right now what it's showing, this is issued by the USGS, a 35% chance that throughout this weekend and early next week, we could still see about a magnitude 5.0 earthquake. We've seen over 120 so far, just over the scale of 2.5, but we've seen closer to 200 on the scale widespread. Now, about a 99% chance of a 3.0 happening as we head into this weekend and early next week, too. So let's take a quick look at what's happening right behind me. It was yesterday, just about this time, around 10:44, when that initial magnitude 7.0 earthquake hit just offshore of Humboldt County, along the San Andreas coastline, or the San Andreas Fault along that coastline of California. That's what shook the hardest. Now, right after, we continued to add up all those smaller aftershocks, but some of the strongest ones were closer to around a 4.7 and almost a 5.0. And that was happening throughout the afternoon hours. So a lot of community members during that time, with that initial tsunami warning that was issued, were really concerned, especially along that coast. Now, another thing to mention, too, the last time that the Bay Area or just anywhere throughout that coastline has seen a tsunami warning was back in 2011 after the Fukushima quake happened, and that was a while ago. So a lot of community members throughout this region, as you see this did you feel it map, widespread from Humboldt County all the way down into the Bay Area. This is the first time these community members got that alert on their phones, that MyShake app that a lot of Californians use, especially when it comes to these conditions. And so all of this to say that this has really shaken things up in a lot of ways. It caused a lot of concern, and now the biggest thing too is it makes you more aware. You need those apps if you live in California. You need those apps if you live along the West Coast. The ring of fire stretches all throughout our West coastline, and so it's important to have that and be prepared in case an earthquake is in your area.
Well, and then nationally, systems are in place for tornado warnings, hurricane warnings, so it just speaks to all of us. Make sure where you live, you have the apps that Jess talked about. All right, coming up, a big development in a closely watched chokehold death case out of New York City. A jury providing a huge headline and a judge saying to the jury, go back to the table and keep talking. You're watching CBS News 24/7 on a Friday. Got some breaking news for you on CBS News 24/7. When we see it, you see it. New orders from the judge in the New York case involving Daniel Penny and that chokehold death of Jordan Neely. So the judge telling the jury to keep going after they said they were deadlocked on that manslaughter charge. So here is the moment our WCBS team learned of that breaking news update.
According to Alice just moments ago, this was all just discussed inside the courtroom between both sides of attorneys and the judge. The defense was asking the judge for a mistrial. The judge, it seems, has just instructed the jury and has decided on what's called an Allen charge. That is basically telling the jury to reconsider their positions, to go back to deliberating, to try and come up with a unanimous vote on that first count. We will, of course, keep you updated on this ongoing process going on behind me, but for now, we're live here in Lower Manhattan. Doug Williams, CBS News, New York.
We're also following breaking news out of Pennsylvania. A woman has been found dead days after being swallowed up into a sinkhole. That woman, and you might remember this story, vanished when she went out to look for her cat. Our affiliate, KDKA, is covering the story, so let's listen in to their coverage from moments ago.
We are following breaking news this noon. After days of searching, the body of a woman who fell into a Westmoreland County sinkhole has been found. KDKA's Krista Rose has been following the search for 64-year-old Elizabeth Pollard and is live this noon in Unity Township. Chris.
John, good afternoon. Yes, just about an hour ago, officials here in Unity Township say that they have found the remains of Elizabeth Pollard, the 64-year-old who went missing around 5 p.m. on Monday. She fell through a sinkhole some 30 feet down into an old abandoned mine, and the search for her has just been ongoing. It has been days and days. Hundreds of people have been out here in Unity Township searching to find her, and then around 11 a.m. this morning, that is when officials say she was officially found. Now, this scene here has turned into essentially a crime scene. State police say there is no reason to believe that there is a crime, but anytime they find the remains of anyone, they basically do what the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania tells them to do, which is secure the scene, investigate, and of course they are going to be having a press conference later today. The family of Pollard's just arrived here on scene. They have not spoken to media, but we do know that her body was found, and obviously this is while it's sad news, it is a relief, I'm sure, to the family and to the surrounding community. But now the work begins to determine just what happened, just how she fell, and now after the scene is clear, the Bureau of Mines will be going in to investigate this old mine that's been abandoned since the early 1950s. Of course, we're going to have more on this story throughout the day coming to you, but for now, reporting live in Unity Township, Westmoreland County, Krista Rose, KDKA TV News. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Chris, thanks for that. Not the outcome anyone wanted. Search crews spent nearly 2 full days digging through that abandoned coal mine, and this is now how the headlines shape up on a Friday in that family's life. Still ahead, a multi-state manhunt. We hear from a former FBI special agent on what it will take to find the gunman who killed a healthcare executive in New York City. Until then, we're watching for breaking news here on our monitors. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Nice to have you with us. I'm Reed Cowan. So, day 3 of a national manhunt for the gunman who killed the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, Brian Thompson. So video to our monitors shows the suspect right after leaving Starbucks before that shooting. So police are slowly zeroing in on that shooter's comings and goings. They hope they can catch him soon. So here's what we know at this hour. We know the suspect traveled to New York City on a bus from Atlanta, and it wasn't just the day of the shooting or the day before, it was days before the shooting. Detectives also found he used a fake New Jersey ID to check into a Manhattan hostel where he stayed prior to that shooting. So let's go live to former FBI Special Agent Doug Coons. Doug, how does knowing about that bus ride, how does knowing about the fake ID really figure into police finding out who this is and catching him?
It's a couple more leads to follow up on. If they think he originated in Atlanta, they can direct some resources that way, start looking at departures and reviewing the videos. It's meticulous. There's going to be a lot of footage because you don't know exactly when he left. But that's what they're working on probably. And then the stops along the way, those would be known. So also looking at those, it's been over 2 days now since this happened. So they still don't have an identity, but they do have a lot of stuff. They've made quite a bit of progress. They've figured out where he lived while he was in New York. It's possible that they have DNA, and that's undergoing analysis right now. That said, although they may have DNA, if this individual has never been arrested, there's going to be nothing to compare it to. So, and also if he's not been arrested for a violent crime, because they don't routinely take DNA samples from nonviolent offenders.
What about the gun? What about the gun that was used in this shooting?
The gun, I'm not sure if that's been identified as to the type yet. Pretty good video footage. It's not the best, but it's better than a lot that I have seen. It looks like it had, I would guess that's a homemade or some sort of aftermarket silencer, because it made I'm speculating a little bit here, but my speculation is that's what made the gun malfunction. It didn't allow the slide to cycle properly, but it also looked like he was prepared for that, like he was not unfamiliar with that happening, and quickly cleared it and was able to fire again. The backpack, it's very distinctive. It's slim. It looks like it's possibly made for a laptop, in my opinion. They have probably either already identified the maker of that and are investigating who might have purchased those in the recent past. Looking at the social media still and the threats that were reported to have come in prior to this. There's a lot to do yet, but the longer it goes, the colder it gets.
Is that something that is very much a reality in law enforcement? With every day that we don't hear a name, the probability of catching the guy goes down?
I believe so. In my experience, the more time that elapses, it's kind of an exponential relationship that it gets much more hard to identify the person. Hopefully, he'll make another mistake, which will reinvigorate the case, or something that they're working on already will come to light. But definitely the more time that elapses, the harder it gets. Another thing that,
go ahead.
Another thing that, I think about is the news on this is quite extensive, and it's a double-edged sword, because he's probably watching this too. So if investigators believe, he may be in the Atlanta area based on what they figured out, he's probably going to get out of Atlanta. So they have to be judicious in what they release to the media, and perhaps they know something that they've not released, and it's for the purpose of keeping him from digging deeper in.
All right, Doug, thank you so much for that conversation. We know families planning a funeral and so many people wondering how this could happen right there on a very busy street in Manhattan. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Well, the November jobs report is out. President Joe Biden says it's a sign of America's comeback continuing. The report shows the U.S. economy created 227,000 jobs that month. That's a sharp recovery from October, when the report showed a meager gain, about 36,000 jobs. But this latest jobs report shows that the national unemployment rate ticked up to 4.2%. That's from 4.1%. So to break it all down, let's go live now to CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger. Jill, good to see you again. What does this report indicate about wage increases?
Well, wages were up from a year ago. We do this sort of on an average, so it's not for everybody. I get it. But average annual wages up by 4% from a year ago. And that is ahead of the 2.5% inflation rate. So here's the good news. Workers' pay has now outpaced the inflation rate for mostly 6 to 8 months or so. So that's the good news. The bad news is we still have a ways to go because we know that inflation spike really did push a lot of people under the line. Basically, they weren't making as much as the inflation rate was rising. They're catching up now. And so hopefully if this continues, people will be able to put that inflationary period in the rearview mirror.
So, Jill, I want to ask you about this because we know this is the second to the last full job report under the leadership of President Joe Biden. What legacy do you think he leaves behind when it comes to the labor market?
Well, you know, I always hate to ascribe too much credit to a president and also too much blame because economic cycles, they move in massive periods of time. So what President Biden gets is he gets to oversee the post-COVID huge resumption in hiring, almost 17 million jobs. So 17 million jobs during the past 4 years. That's great. Now, of course, Trump had to inherit the problems of 2020 during the COVID pandemic, and we saw so many job losses. So the idea of comparing two administrations with one once-in-a-century pandemic in between seems to be not so great. So what we do know about where we are in the labor market is that we have solid job creation, and it's been a while that the economy has been expanding, and that is good news for U.S. workers, and that is good news for the U.S. economy.
All right, and sort of forecasting into the future, this report comes, less than 2 weeks before the final Fed meeting of the year. So add it all up, does the economic data point to a potential rate cut?
I think it does. I mean, the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, has been talking about how the economy is growing at a pretty decent pace. And I think he's giving us maybe a little bit of a glimpse inside the Fed, which is we're going to cut rates probably at this December meeting in 10 days, 0.25 percentage point. But next year, we might not go in lockstep every single meeting. They might take a meeting off. Remember, the Fed's got a difficult job. They have to thread this needle. They need to have job creation strong enough so that anyone who wants a job gets a job. That's great. But if it's too strong or the economy runs too hot, then the inflation rate remains higher than the Fed would like. So the Fed still has a ways to go before we get down to 2%, but it looks like they're on track, and I think that we'll get there next year.
Nice, reassuring news on a Friday. CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger, always great to talk to you. Have a great weekend. We also have an update in the death of a teen who fell to his death at an Orlando theme park. How a $10 piece of equipment could have kept a young person alive, and the massive dollar figure his family will get now that a judgment has come. A huge contrast in numbers and a tragedy that will go on for the rest of one family's life when we come back on CBS News 24/7. An update now in the case of Tyree Sampson, a 14-year-old boy who tragically fell to his death from an Orlando theme park ride in 2022. Stephanie Rodriguez reports a judge just ordered the ride's manufacturer to pay that family a hefty judgment to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Thursday's decision was a default judgment because the Austrian-based manufacturer of the ride didn't show up to court, so the jury's job was to determine just how much money they now owe the family.
I was not there to protect him.
Almost 3 years after 14-year-old Tyree Sampson slipped out of the free-fall ride at Icon Park, his mother is still in disbelief.
They robbed me, they robbed him, they robbed us. I'm left with memories like, what would he be doing? Well, how would he look? I mean, that's unfair. It's unfair. It's unfair, especially the kind of kid he was. It's unfair.
His loved ones took the stand Thursday, sharing their favorite memories of the teenager they call loving, gentle, smart, and full of potential.
He had the world to offer. The world. She had a chance to realize how great he was.
The case focused on the emotional and physical toll the teenager's death has taken on them.
I lost my hair, I lost my teeth, I lost weight, I lost 30 pounds of weight, man.
An engineer's report found sensors on the ride were manually adjusted to allow for larger people, leaving the teen improperly secured. The attorneys told the jury if Funtime had taken the proper precautions when making the 430-foot tall ride, Samson would be alive.
They built the highest tower, the most dangerous tower. They didn't install a $10 seatbelt.
Samson's mother spoke after the verdict.
I don't wish this on any parent, no one. To lose a child is the worst that can happen to any parent in the world.
Nakia Dodd's attorney says the family hopes this judgment puts Funtime out of business. Reporting in Orlando, Stephanie Rodriguez, Getting Results, News 6.
Well, this 2019 video to our monitors reminds us of the moments when Paris's Notre Dame went up in flames. Tragic day there. The roof collapsed, and a lot of people wondered around the world who watched this in horror if the Notre Dame would ever rise from the ashes. Well, now we have a look at the major reconstruction effort of this beloved facility, the Notre Dame reopening next week. Well, today, French President Emmanuel Macron will visit that restored cathedral. And then this drone footage really shows us the rebuilt spire of the cathedral and all of the work of hundreds of people who came together to make this great phoenix rise from the ashes, so to speak. That cathedral will be seen by President-elect Donald Trump and dozens of other world leaders who are flying in to be present for the reopening ceremonies. French authorities suspect an electrical fault or a burning cigarette could be to blame for this historic fire. Back here in the United States, you see the orange glow against the night there, a massive firefight overnight in Baltimore at a wood recycling plant. Problem was, in addition to the fire, some strong winds that really fueled a fast spread and posed major challenges to crews. An investigation is now underway into what started the fire. We also have an update that's tragic. 3 mountain climbers likely fell to their deaths from New Zealand's highest peak. Climbers, 2 from the United States, 1 from Canada, went missing 5 days ago. Search crews say they haven't found their bodies, and it's likely they will not be able to get to the bodies where they think the climbers landed. So far, no sign of these men other than footprints left in the snow and belongings that they found on the slopes. Speaking of snow, these are snow squalls that we're going to show you. They are expected this weekend in New England. And Jess, what can you tell us about what we can expect?
You know, widespread throughout the New England area, all throughout the mid-Atlantic, they've been dealing with heavy snow and heavy rain, and of course the winds too. Wind gusts got up to around 60 miles per hour. It was hurricane force winds throughout that area. And as we head into this weekend's forecast, this is what they're expecting. Those storms continue to sweep throughout that region. Light, thin storm lines continuing to move throughout that area, bringing in heavy snow at times to community members. But of course, we're still continuing to see winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories too, especially up into upstate New York. You see that in that purple and pink color right there. So let's dive into this storm system, because since Thanksgiving week, we have been dealing with some hectic activity up there, and it's all due to low pressure kind of diving in just from the north, closer to the Canadian border, that brings in all that heavy snow, that cold, dense air on the back end, and of course those windy conditions as well. That's going to continue as we head into this weekend's forecast. The lake effect snow continues widespread throughout upstate New York, Pennsylvania, and all the way over into Ohio too. And those thin storm lines continue to sweep throughout New York as we head into early next week. We'll continue to watch the winter storm warning and the lake effect snow warning stick around at least until Saturday, which means we could see an additional 12 inches of snow from today until Saturday. But the winds are actually starting to die down, which is great news for us. It was only a few days ago we were talking about 60 to 65 mile per hour wind gust. Now it's down to 35 mile per hour winds. But that's on top of all the snow we've seen so far. Upstate New York got over 5 feet just within this week alone. Right. We have about a minute and a half left in this broadcast. It seems like it was just yesterday that we were right here broadcasting to the nation and the world about that 7.0 earthquake. In the time that we have left, Jess, let's talk about aftershocks, because we know so many people watched on streaming platforms and they want to know, is this over for California? You've been telling me all day
the rumbles are going to continue.
Well, there's something that I really like that the USGS does. They put out an aftershock forecast the moment that earthquake happens, and they'll update it too, right? But it shows you what you can expect throughout the next 7 days. And it shows you the percentage of what we're potentially going to see. When it comes to a magnitude 5.0 aftershock, there's about a 35% chance as of now. That number will change as we head into this weekend and early next week, but there's still a 99 and a 98% chance that we could at least see magnitude 3.0 or even a 4.0 too along that coast near Humboldt County. So that's important to note. You actually see that chart right behind me. I'm glad they pulled it up just to show you we're not going to see a 6. We're not going to see a 7. There's a very slight chance that would be the case. However, we will continue to see those rumbles throughout that coastline into this weekend.
It was exactly 24 hours ago that we got those alerts on our phone. This broadcast originating out of Northern California, not far from the epicenter of that quake, and then the ensuing tsunami warning that came, that hit, that caused hundreds of thousands of people to get an alert on their phone saying to get to higher ground. 24 hours later, we have gratitude that the damage was not worse, that there were no deaths, no injuries, and also to you for watching us. CBS News 24/7, when we see it, you see it. That's the beauty of this broadcast, connecting to our affiliates, our reporters all over planet Earth to bring the news and the headlines home to you. Have a great weekend.